If we now look at Chapter 2 of the consultation paper, this examined MPO stakeholders and their accountability and decision-making requirements. This was to assist in the achievement of Objective 2 of the project, which is to support the provision of MPO financial information that is useful for decision-making and accountability, balancing the needs of preparers and users. It was proposed that MPOs are accountable to service users, resource providers, and regulators, and that they have a wider societal accountability. We asked if you agreed with these proposed groups of stakeholders. Now, in total, 82% of responses were in agreement with the proposals, with a further 14% of responses partially in agreement. A number of respondents did, however, indicate that the focus on external stakeholders meant that recognition had not been given to internal stakeholders who are also important in the MPO context. Examples provided by these respondents of internal stakeholders, including those charged with governance, staff, volunteers, and members. Given the broad accountability perspective of the chapter and the nature of many MPOs, we agree that some stakeholders who may traditionally be seen as internal in nature should be better recognised. In the MPO context, this would include, for example, groups such as non-executive governing boards. So, we are proposing to examine how the needs of these groups can be reflected. Now, the conceptual basis of international frameworks for general purpose financial reporting define primary users as those who do not possess the authority to require an entity to disclose the information they need. In the MPO context, primary users could therefore be the public to whom the MPO provides goods and services, resource providers, and those fulfilling oversight functions on their behalf, who do not possess the authority to require an MPO to disclose the information they need for accountability and decision-making purposes. While internal stakeholders, like those charged with governance, will be users of the MPO's general purpose financial reports, they would generally not be seen as primary users, as they would be expected to have the authority to request information tailored to their own specific needs. This will be an important consideration as we examine how the needs of internal stakeholders can be reflected as we move towards a specific focus on the objectives on MPO financial reporting and the information needs of users. Now, Chapter 2 also examined the information needs of the external stakeholders identified. It proposed that external stakeholders need to know that an MPO is achieving its objectives in a way that maximizes economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the use of resources, while complying with restrictions and regulations, and in the context of its longer-term financial health. We asked if you agreed with the information needs proposed for external stakeholders. Now, in total, 87% of responses were in agreement with the proposals, with a further 6% of responses partially in agreement. Several respondents did, though, question the information needs that were presented and provided arguments for some that had not been included. This related, in particular, to an apparent absence of the outcomes achieved by the MPO, the view that stakeholders needed to understand whether an MPO was maximising economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in the use of resources, and a narrow focus on long-term financial health. Now, we had intended that outcomes be partly covered under achievement of objectives, but the number of respondents who identified an issue would indicate that from their perspective, this was not adequately covered. With respect to economy, efficiency, and effectiveness, while most respondents did agree that value for money considerations have at least some relevance to MPOs, a term such as optimization was preferred to maximization to better reflect how resources are used to support activities and achieve outcomes in the MPO context. The focus on long-term financial sustainability was also raised by several respondents, who questioned whether stakeholders would also not expect to see areas such as risk, long-term strategy and plans, and environmental sustainability covered. These respondents supported a broader sustainability perspective beyond that was presented in the consultation paper. A number of the respondents also expressed the viewpoint that the focus of the chapter was not sufficiently tied to financial reporting. Their view was that rather than articulate accountability needs from a broad perspective, it should be focused specifically from the perspective of general purpose financial reports. For these respondents, The chapter's broad perspective did not allow for a specific focus on the objectives of financial reporting and financial statements. For some, this meant there was an insufficient emphasis placed on the role that financial statements play in demonstrating accountability and stewardship, with instead too much emphasis on decision-making usefulness. This had led for them to a lack of acknowledgement that areas such as the use of restricted funds was crucial in demonstrating accountability for many MPOs. It was also argued that the broad perspective meant that the primary users of MPO financial statements, which would be important for the development of the guidance, had not been well articulated. Of the key stakeholder groups highlighted, some respondents argued they would typically and appropriately obtain information by other means rather than through general purpose financial reports. For these respondents, it was necessary to determine those for whom information would be most appropriately provided to through financial statements. Now, we agree with many of these comments, and as already highlighted, as the project moves to the exposure draft stage, we will determine who the primary users of MPO general purpose financial reports are and be articulating the financial and non-financial information needs of those users, specifically with reference to general purpose financial reports.